Genesis 29 1-5. So Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and saw a well in the field, and behold, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it, for out of that well they watered the flocks. A large stone was on the well's mouth. Now all the flocks would be gathered there, and they would roll the stone from the well's mouth, water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the well's mouth. And Jacob said to them, My brethren, where are you from? And they said, We are from Haran. Then he said to them, Do you know Laban the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him.
As Jacob arrives in Haran, he encounters shepherds at a well, a common gathering place in the ancient Near East. The stone on the well's mouth, which required communal effort to move, was likely a measure to protect the well's water. The conversation between Jacob and the shepherds establishes that he has indeed arrived at his intended destination, the homeland of his mother, Rebekah, and the place where his uncle Laban lives.
Genesis 29 6-10. So he said to them, Is he well? And they said, Yes, and look, his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep. Then he said, Look, it is still high day, it is not time for the cattle to be gathered together. Water the sheep, and go and feed them. But they said, We cannot until all the flocks are gathered together, and they have rolled the stone from the well's mouth, then we water the sheep. Now while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel the daughter of Laban his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock of Laban his mother's brother.
Rachel, Jacob's cousin and future wife, is introduced in this passage. Jacob's decision to move the stone and water Rachel's sheep himself is an act of service and a significant display of strength. This action might also be indicative of his immediate affection for Rachel. The narrative skillfully intertwines elements of romantic interest and divine providence, setting the stage for Jacob's time in Haran.
Genesis 29 11-14. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's relative and that he was Rebekah's son. So she ran and told her father. Then it came to pass, when Laban heard the report about Jacob his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, and embraced him and kissed him, and brought him to his house. So he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, Surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him for a month.
The meeting between Jacob and Rachel is marked by affection and emotion. Jacob reveals his identity and their family connection, and Rachel immediately goes to inform her father, Laban. Laban, upon hearing the news, enthusiastically welcomes Jacob, embracing him and bringing him to his home. Laban acknowledges the familial bond, recognizing Jacob as his own relative. Jacob's stay with Laban lasts for a month, during which time further developments in their relationship and Jacob's subsequent actions unfold.
Genesis 29 15-20. Then Laban said to Jacob, Because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what should your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters, the name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were delicate, but Rachel was beautiful of form and appearance. Now Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel your younger daughter. And Laban said, It is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed only a few days to him because of the love he had for her.
Laban, recognizing Jacob's value as a relative and potential son-in-law, proposes a deal regarding Jacob's wages. Laban has 2 daughters, Leah and Rachel, and Jacob declares his love for Rachel and his willingness to serve Laban for 7 years in exchange for her hand in marriage. Laban agrees to Jacob's proposal, preferring to give Rachel to Jacob rather than another man. The passage highlights Jacob's deep love for Rachel, as the 7 years of labor seem like only a few days to him due to his affection for her. This love and commitment set the stage for a significant period in Jacob's life as he strives to obtain Rachel as his wife.
Genesis 29 21-26. Then Jacob said to Laban, Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go into her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. Now it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. And Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. So it came to pass in the morning, that behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me? And Laban said, It must not be done so in our country, to give the younger before the firstborn.
After the completion of the 7 years, Jacob confronts Laban and requests to be given his wife, Rachel. In response, Laban organizes a wedding feast, but during the evening, he deceives Jacob by giving him Leah, his older daughter, instead of Rachel. The following morning, Jacob discovers the deception and confronts Laban, expressing his disappointment and questioning Laban's actions. Laban defends his actions by referring to the custom of not giving the younger daughter in marriage before the older daughter. Laban suggests that Jacob can still marry Rachel, but he must fulfill another 7 years of service.
Genesis 29:27-30, Fulfill her week, and we will give you this one also for the service which you will serve with me still another 7 years. Then Jacob did so and fulfilled her week. So he gave him his daughter Rachel as wife also. And Laban gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a maid. Then Jacob also went into Rachel, and he also loved Rachel more than Leah. And he served with Laban still another 7 years.
Laban proposes a solution, offering Rachel as Jacob's wife as well, but requiring an additional 7 years of service. Jacob agrees to the terms and fulfills the bridal week with Leah. Following this, he marries Rachel, whom he loves more than Leah. Laban further enhances the complicated dynamics by giving his maid Bilhah to Rachel. Jacob's life becomes entwined with Laban's family through these marriages, and he commits to serving Laban for another 7 years to obtain Rachel as his wife. This sequence of events illustrates the consequences of Laban's deception and the lengths Jacob is willing to go for the love of Rachel. It sets the stage for a complex and challenging period in Jacob's life as he navigates the dynamics of his marriages and his continued service to Laban.
Genesis 29:31-35, When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, The Lord has surely looked on my affliction. Now therefore, my husband will love me. Then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, Because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. She conceived again and bore a son, and said, Now this time my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name was called Levi. And she conceived again and bore a son, and said, Now I will praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah. Then she stopped bearing.
Although Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah, it was Leah who first conceived and bore children. Recognizing Leah's unloved state, the Lord opened her womb, while Rachel remained barren. Leah saw each son as an opportunity to gain Jacob's love and attention. Leah's firstborn son was named Reuben, signifying that the Lord had seen her affliction and that she hoped Jacob would love her now. She later gave birth to Simeon, believing that the Lord heard of her unloved state and gave her another son. The birth of her third son, Levi, reinforced her hope that Jacob would become attached to her. Finally, she bore a fourth son named Judah, which means praise. Leah acknowledged that it was through the Lord's grace and blessing that she had these sons. The birth of these 4 sons to Leah plays a significant role in the lineage of Israel. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah would become the ancestors of 4 of the 12 tribes of Israel. Despite her desire for Jacob's love, Leah's faith and praise to the Lord shine through her choice of names for her sons.
Genesis 31:8, Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister, and said to Jacob, Give me children, or else I die. And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel, and he said, Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? So she said, Here is my maid Bilhah, go into her, and she will bear a child on my knees, that I also may have children by her. Then she gave him Bilhah her maid as wife, and Jacob went into her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan. And Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, with great wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed. So she called his name Naphtali.
Since Rachel was unable to conceive, she became envious of her sister Leah's ability to bear children. Rachel expressed her frustration to Jacob, desperate for children of her own. Jacob, frustrated by Rachel's words, reminded her that he was not the one who could grant her the ability to conceive. In response, Rachel offered her maid Bilhah to Jacob as a surrogate, hoping to have children through her. Bilhah became Jacob's wife, and she conceived and bore him a son named Dan. Rachel believed that God had vindicated her and granted her this child. Bilhah conceived again and bore a second son, and Rachel named him Naphtali, expressing her sense of triumph over her sister Leah. These events showcase the complicated dynamics within Jacob's family and the measures taken to have children. The rivalry and envy between Rachel and Leah intensify as they compete to bear children for Jacob, leading to the involvement of their maids as surrogates. The names given to the children reflect the emotional states and beliefs of their respective mothers.
Genesis 39-13, when Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah her maid and gave her to Jacob as wife. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, a troop comes. So she called his name Gad. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, I am happy, for the daughters will call me blessed. So she called his name Asher.
After Rachel's success in bearing children through her maid, Leah followed suit by giving her maid Zilpah to Jacob as a wife. Zilpah bore Jacob a son, and Leah named him Gad, meaning a troop comes. This name reflects the anticipation of future strength and power. Zilpah conceived again and bore another son for Jacob, and Leah named him Asher, which means happy or blessed. Leah rejoiced, believing that her status as a mother of multiple sons would earn her respect and praise among her daughters. The ongoing competition between Rachel and Leah continues as they employ their maids to bear children for Jacob. Each birth is accompanied by the hope for a better future and a desire for recognition and validation.
Genesis 30:14-21, Now Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field, and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, Please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, Is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, Therefore he will lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes. When Jacob came out of the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, You must come into me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night. And God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Then Leah said, God has given me my wages, because I have given my maid to my husband. So she called his name Issachar. Then Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. And Leah said, God has endowed me with a good endowment, now my husband will dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons. So she called his name Zebulun. Afterward she bore a daughter, and called her name Dinah.
In the midst of the ongoing rivalry between Rachel and Leah, a peculiar incident unfolds. Reuben, Leah's eldest son, finds mandrakes in the field and brings them to his mother. Rachel, eager to obtain these mandrakes believed to have fertility-enhancing properties, asks Leah for some in exchange for Jacob spending the night with her. Leah, feeling resentful towards Rachel for taking her husband away, agrees to the deal. That night, Jacob lies with Leah, and she conceives and bears him a fifth son named Issachar. Leah sees this as a result of God listening to her and rewarding her for giving her maid to Jacob. Leah conceives again and gives birth to a sixth son, whom she names Zebulun, meaning dwelling. She believes that because she has borne 6 sons, Jacob will now fully dwell with her in their marital relationship. Finally, Leah bears a daughter named Dinah, completing her childbearing journey. These passages continue to depict the complex dynamics and competition within Jacob's family. The incident with the mandrakes reveals the lengths to which Rachel and Leah go to secure Jacob's attention and favor. Leah's faith in God's blessing and her desire to win Jacob's affection are evident as she celebrates each birth as a personal victory.
Genesis 30:22-24. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. And she conceived and bore a son, and said, God has taken away my reproach. So she called his name Joseph, and said, The Lord shall add to me another son.
After a long struggle, God remembers Rachel and opens her womb. She conceives and gives birth to a son, bringing her great joy and relieving her of the reproach she had felt for being barren. She names him Joseph, which means may he add or may he increase, signifying her hope for future children. Rachel's faith and patience are rewarded as she becomes a mother. Her joyous proclamation reflects her deep gratitude towards God for answering her prayers and fulfilling her desire to have a child. She eagerly anticipates the addition of more children to her family.
Genesis 30:25-28. And it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said to Laban, Send me away, that I may go to my own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me go, for you know my service which I have done for you. And Laban said to him, Please stay, if I have found favor in your eyes, for I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake. Then he said, Name me your wages, and I will give it.
After the birth of Joseph, Jacob approaches his father-in-law Laban, expressing his desire to return to his own land along with his wives and children. Jacob emphasizes the years of dedicated service he has rendered to Laban and requests that Laban fulfill his promise to let him go. Laban, recognizing that his own prosperity is due in part to Jacob's presence, asks him to remain, acknowledging that the Lord has blessed him on account of Jacob. However, Jacob insists on leaving and proposes a discussion of his wages before his departure. The relationship between Jacob and Laban becomes strained as Jacob desires to establish his own household and fulfill his own calling. Laban acknowledges the favor and blessing that Jacob has brought into his life, but the tension between them sets the stage for future events.
Genesis 30:29-34. So he said to him, You know how I have served you and how your livestock has been with me. For what you had before I came was little, and it has increased to a great amount. The Lord has blessed you since my coming. And now, when shall I also provide for my own house? So he said, What shall I give you? And Jacob said, You shall not give me anything. If you will do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep your flocks. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from there all the speckled and spotted sheep, and all the brown ones among the lambs, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and these shall be my wages. So my righteousness will answer for me in time to come, when the subject of my wages comes before you. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and brown among the lambs, will be considered stolen, if it is with me. And Laban said, Oh, that it were according to your word.
Jacob presents his case to Laban, recounting how his presence has resulted in the substantial growth of Laban's livestock and wealth. He asserts that it is now time for him to provide for his own household and requests a specific arrangement for his wages. Jacob proposes that he will continue to care for Laban's flocks but requests that, as payment, he be allowed to keep all the speckled and spotted sheep, as well as the brown lambs and goats. This arrangement ensures that Jacob's portion will be distinct and identifiable, while the remaining animals will be recognized as belonging to Laban. Laban, seeing the potential advantage in this agreement, agrees to Jacob's terms, expressing his desire for it to be done according to Jacob's word. The stage is set for Jacob to employ his knowledge and skill to increase his own flock and fulfill his commitment to Laban. As we reflect on these passages, we see the fulfillment of God's promise to Rachel as she gives birth to Joseph. We also observe the strained relationship between Jacob and Laban, with Jacob seeking to establish his own household. Through it all, we witness God's faithfulness and provision for his people in various ways.
Genesis 30:35-36. So he removed that day the male goats that were striped and spotted, all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white in it, and all the brown ones among the lambs, and gave them into the hand of his sons. Then he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks.
Jacob wastes no time in implementing his plan. On that very day, he separates the specific animals that would become his wages: male goats that were striped and spotted, female goats that were speckled and spotted, those with white markings, and the brown lambs. These he entrusts to the care of his sons, ensuring their separation from Laban's flocks. To create distance and prevent any further mixing of the flocks, Laban puts a 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob. This physical separation solidifies the boundaries and marks the beginning of Jacob's independent endeavor to increase his own flock. Jacob diligently tends to the remainder of Laban's flocks, fulfilling his commitment to continue feeding and caring for them. He carefully manages and protects the animals entrusted to him, ensuring their well-being and productivity.
Genesis 30:37-43. Now Jacob took for himself rods of green poplar and of the almond and chestnut trees, peeled white strips in them, and exposed the white which was in the rods. And the rods which he had peeled, he set before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, so that they should conceive when they came to drink. So the flocks conceived before the rods, and the flocks brought forth streaked, speckled, and spotted. Then Jacob separated the lambs, and made the flocks face toward the streaked and all the brown in the flock of Laban, but he put his own flocks by themselves and did not put them with Laban's flock. And it came to pass whenever the stronger livestock conceived, that Jacob placed the rods before the eyes of the livestock in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the flocks were feeble, he did not put them in, so the feebler were Laban's and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man became exceedingly prosperous, and had large flocks, female and male servants, and camels and donkeys.
Jacob employs a clever and unconventional breeding method to further his plan. He selects rods of green poplar, almond, and chestnut trees and peels white strips in them. He places these stripped rods in the gutters and watering troughs where the flocks come to drink. The intention is for the flocks to conceive when they come to drink, in the presence of the striped and spotted rods. Through God's providence, the flocks conceive and give birth to streaked, speckled, and spotted offspring. Jacob also strategically separates the lambs and arranges the flocks to face the streaked and brown animals, separating them from Laban's flock. This deliberate separation aims to ensure the strongest and healthiest animals produce the desired offspring. As a result of these practices, Jacob's flocks flourish and multiply. He experiences exceptional prosperity, acquiring a vast number of female and male servants, as well as camels and donkeys. God blesses Jacob's efforts, honoring his faithfulness and enabling him to prosper even in challenging circumstances. In these passages, we witness Jacob's resourcefulness and wisdom in breeding and managing the flocks. We also observe God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises to Jacob. Through Jacob's diligence and reliance on God's provision, he experiences a significant increase in wealth and possessions.